Thanks, Malvika. Can you actually see the slides? Awesome. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see some of your wonderful faces. And welcome to our Turing Way Community Forum of the 21st of February, 2005. If I'm not mistaken, this is our first community forum of the year. Very exciting. And in case you're wondering who is actually speaking, that's myself, Esther Plump. I am a Turing Way community project member, and I'm going to use this opportunity to shamelessly plug something I'm working on in the Turing Way. I am working on an SSI project on how people contribute to the Turing Way, with a particular focus on whether these contributions differ between volunteer and paid contributors. And so we have an issue on GitHub where you can learn more about this. And we will have a more extensive discussion about this in the Collaboration Cafe of the 19th of March. And so we'll go over ethics, which doesn't sound very exciting, but I'll try to make it as exciting as possible. And you'll actually get to have a say about the whole procedure, the questions, and so forth. So I also hope to see you there. But for now, we're obviously here for the community call. And before we dive into depths of that, just as a reminder, any events from the Turing Way is following a code of conduct. You can read the details in the Turing Way book. If you are experiencing any or witnessing any unacceptable behavior, please do contact the Turing Way via turingway at Turing at ac.uk or at Gmail, I think we're shifting to. But hopefully someone can put that in the chat, just in case you experience something, or if I'm saying something that is unacceptable, please do let me know. I'd like to not do that in the future, so please do help me correct. And some more housekeeping. We're using a shared note document. And amongst others, we use it to introduce ourselves. And I don't think everyone has done that already. So please do check in from line 42 onwards and share who you are. And maybe someone else can repeat the question, but I think it was, what have you learned from open science communities? So I'm happy to learn from you. What have you learned? Again, the call will be recorded, so you can have your camera off, microphone muted when you're not speaking. If you don't want to be in the recording, I encourage you to wait until the end of the call so that you're not in the recording. And as Malvika said, you shouldn't be in the recording if you're not speaking. So you should be relatively safe to have your camera on, which is very nice. Then I can see your faces while I'm rambling instead of being in a black space box, which is my computer screen. We're going to use breakout rooms in a bit. What is helpful to actually facilitate these breakout rooms is if you could please add an S or a W before your Zoom name to indicate your preference for whether you would like to be in a spoken room or a written room. So please do edit your name. You can do that by clicking on it, hovering above your Zoom window. Then you see this blue button with 3 dots, and there, if you right click it, there you should be finding the option with rename. I am not going to do that right now because I'm terrible with these types of multitasking things, but I am seeing some people changing their names already. So thank you for that. And we should have closed caption, live transcription available. So you can also follow along there. Here's our agenda for today. So we just did the opening and welcome by myself. In a minute, we're going to head out into a breakout discussion about governance, which also might not sound super exciting, but it will be. And after that, and a little share out, we will go into some working group updates. And then we continue into governance issues by getting an update about the steering committee. Afterwards, we shall have a break because that's all very heavy topics. And then we can go to more loose or more less heavy community announcements. And after that, we have an open Q&A. I have no idea what AOB means, and a closing. So if someone can enlighten me of what AOB means in the chat, that would be lovely. All right, breakout activity. We're going to discuss in smaller breakout rooms, what role do you think the Turing Way plays in data science ecosystem? And I think we have some extra questions in the Etherpad as well. And I'm hoping someone else is making breakout rooms while I'm talking. Excellent. Thank you, Mavika. And we have some prompts to guide you through this question. They're also in the Etherpad. But these questions are, what role has the Turing Way played in the research landscape and community? What specific gaps in skills, practices, or culture does the Turing Way fill? And what impacts have you observed, whether personally, within your institution, or more broadly? And how can we ensure the Turing Way's continued impact? So, lovely questions. I'm jealous because I don't think I get to go to a breakout room. Should I already thank people for their testimonials, Malvika? All right. So this, I think, is very much in line with an issue that we had open, where we are also asking for your testimonials. So maybe your discussions in the breakout room can also inspire you to write a little bit about that and add it to the issue. Because this is very important to demonstrate the impact of projects such as the Turing Way and to continue secured funding to keep everything running. So it would be really great if the Turing Way has some sort of impact on you, and that could be just using the images of the book, for example. It doesn't have to be that big or amazing, although the images are amazing. But if you experience any impact from the Turing Way, please share that impact in this issue, and please discuss it in your breakout rooms right now. Yeah, I think then we're ready for breakout rooms.
Sounds good. I have already created a room. I will have the room auto close in 10 minutes. I'll remind you, by the way. And Ariel, you don't need to join, but you're in a room in case you do feel like listening to people. All right, I'm gonna open all the room. See you, Esther.
Welcome back, everyone. We have some time to share out what you've discussed in the breakout room, if anyone would like to share, keeping in mind that this part is being recorded. Do we have any volunteers? Kate. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. Also, there's some
It's
heavy
Kathy,
typing.
but it was an
Kathy,
entirely
sorry.
reasonable pronunciation for the spelling. So I was in the written one, and what we talked a little bit about is sort of what role Turing Way plays in our research, the community of the community of practice agreement was called out specifically as being particularly useful. A lot of us didn't quite remember how we ran across the Turing Way, which I found to be interesting, just that it's sort of been present in our lives as researchers. Um, the Turing Way was highlighted as kind of a place to coalesce around how we do open research and providing guidance for that. So calling that out as being particularly useful. There were some curiosities about kind of what domains might not be represented in this community. It seems to be very medical focused, very so thinking about different both different disciplines and then also reaching out of sort of Euro-America centricism for sort of practices and norms around open science, and thinking a little bit more clearly about what we mean when we say open science, because there are other communities out there that sort of practice these principles that might not particularly embrace the term open science or aren't on our radar as an organization. And please hop in the chat, folks who were in the room, if I missed anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that great summary. Wow. Lots lots of discussion. Do we have someone from another room that would like to share their insights? Kirsty.
Yeah, I'll share. So Patricia was one of the original team members from the Turing Way, and so we started off our conversation by remembering that one of the things that's difficult to communicate about the Turing Way is that it's not really about the book, it's about the people, it's about the skills, it's about scaling that kind of culture shift across our kind of interconnected communities. And Liz also made a point that it is actually important that we don't underplay the book, because the example that she gave was, instead of having projects or other kind of collaborative efforts have to start from scratch, it's so easy to send, here's some documentation, here's a chapter, here are some entries, here are some ways of working in the Turing Way, that then communities can kind of adapt and build off of. They don't have to sort of take the whole everything all in one go, but it's helpful for being specific about ways of working, and then it's also helpful for not reinventing the wheel and kind of starting from a few steps up in order to then kind of workshop that in other projects. So I thought that was a really nice example. And one of the things we also said is that the sharing of chapters to help people understand is actually one of the hardest things for us to track. And that's like an interesting sort of challenge, that it is by design, we don't track if someone either reads, learns, or shares something from the Turing Way.
Yeah, and also just general citations and not really chapter or section citations, because we don't have those. That is still an open issue somewhere, I think. Thanks as well for sharing, Kirsty. Do we have another person that wants to share insights from their group? Jim.
Yeah, I can go. So I think in our group, we spoke quite a bit about how the Turing Way sort of has almost sort of a niche in being a really good source for information about open science and doing things in an ethical, open, reproducible way, whereas a lot of other resources focus much more on sort of technical, so you could say sort of like hard science aspects, so whatever, the programming or maths or whatever it is. And Lara said something really interesting, which was that because in the US now, like research and work around EDI is going to become impossible to fund or to work on, it could become, the Turing Way could become a sort of more important resource, and possibly it might become a place that people are able to continue their work where they're not able to at home now. I thought that was, it was sort of upsetting, but also really nice to hear that like the project is sort of known about and seen that way, and also that actually maybe we can be a place which supports that kind of work now, and has started to think, well, what can we do to welcome and sort of encourage that and make that possible.
Awesome. I love you people. I was going like, oh no, US. And then you just make that ending in such an inspiring and beautiful message. So thank you for that. Thanks. Do we have someone from room 1 that would like to share a couple of thoughts?
I can give it a try if Alejandra and Andrea wants. We talk about a lot about the benefits of being part of the community, and especially the fact that it goes beyond the open science and reproducibility, but it's more a satellite to getting to know more things that are also super important, like ethics, governance, accessibility, So, and also the community of people that it's here, that it's always so welcoming, and it's making sure that everyone feels listened. And in at least for my own experience, I've never felt like a question was looked as simple or not important. Like every question matters here, and people will always come with a very critical way to respond to any question. And I think like it's not very easy to find a spaces where you feel that open spaces where nobody will judge your level of how new you are to open science or how much you know. And also like in terms of skills, or in terms of how, I mean, we were just saying like we use the Turing Way for many things. Like we get access to the books, to the chapters, we take some templates, we interact with the community, and it feels more like all the things that we get and not as much how we help to track all the contributions that the Turing Way community and book provides into our daily lives. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. And Alejandro and Andrea, please tell me if I have forgotten anything important. We discussed many important things anyway.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, everyone. And if you haven't shared this in the GitHub issue, then again, I'm just going to do a repeat of that. Please do share it also in the GitHub issue so that we have a collection of how the Turing Way impacts you or the wider research community, so that we can actually make the case for future funding. So please do that. And also a thank you to the SSI for amplifying the call to action. They shared a call to action on their website/email lists. So thank you for that as well. And thanks everyone here for making this such a wholesome call. This is really what I need in the start of this year. Then updates from our working group members. And the first working group that gets to provide us with an update is the Book Dash working group, if Ariel's up for presenting on this.
Hi folks, yeah, I can give an update to you. So just very quickly, successes, we're planning for a different Book Dash model for May 2025. This will be partially at Collaborations Workshop 2025, which is happening in May, and also partially online, and those online contribution sessions will be open to everybody. The Software Sustainability Institute has been incredibly supportive of this, so we're very pleased. And for those of you who have joined the community more recently, Turing Way actually got its start at Collaborations Workshop back in the day, so we're kind of going back to our roots there for that. Challenges. Funding changes mean that we're looking at different models for Book Dash participation, activities, and support for 2025. So if anyone has ideas for funds that we can apply to, or other sources of support, or new ideas for activities and models for participation, please let us know and open an issue or ping us in Slack. On celebrations, a huge thank you to Esther, who's our chair today for this call, but is also the outgoing chair of the Book Dash working group. She's been amazing stewarding the group over the past year or so. And I will be taking over as chair, which is why I'm doing this update. We've sort of settled on a maximum term limit of 2 years for chairs, so that we can get some rotations going through. Finally, call to action. If you are interested in helping to organize the May or November Book Dashes, please do volunteer for the planning committee. Lele has very helpfully added the link to the form in the chat so that you can apply right here and now. Please do. And then also, if you're not quite ready to do the planning committee, you can take a look at the issue and PR label in the GitHub repo for the Turing Way. for the previous book dash to help finish off November's work. So there's a few pull requests and issues that people started working on. If anyone wants to jump in and help them finish it, that would be amazing. And yes, as Lale said in the chat, expression of interest is open until the 28th of February 2025. And if you are watching the recording back, you can also find the link to the form in the Slack channel and in the January newsletter as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Book Dash Working Group. Moving on to Translation and Localization Working Group. That's all.
Thank you, Esther. So we were in pause during November to January. So we are resuming all the localization calls, should be added to the calendar. We have onboarding call because we've been asked a few times about it. Like a lot of people who join our co-working call, it ends up onboarding calls. So we have like special sort of calls for onboarding. The next one is going to be 26th of February. Renato, who I worked with in some symposium within the National Foundation Berlin, got in touch with me and Malvika from Brazil to sort of work on the Portuguese translation. We also sort of reviewing the mechanisms, especially the transparency by which team members within the localization, within the translation, are trying like take up in leading roles. Again, this ties back to the governance and also ties back to we have co-leads who are stepping down. So like how we are nominating people and how people actually sort of, change roles within the localization, because we have lead for each language and then we have co-lead for the whole sort of group. Celebration, Sandy and Richie delivering talk at the Post Backstage conference, which is in the 11th of March. I'll be joining the Open Science Retreat in Switzerland. I believe this is the same one that Esther and Dan has sort of joined last year in the Netherlands. We'll be speaking, it's an conference, so unstructured, so you can bring more sorts of topics within the discussion, more organic way. So speaking about different topics, including transdisciplinarity, localization, translation. In terms of challenges, it's the same challenge. The multi-deployment remains a challenge, and I think we didn't have any sort of meeting with the infrastructure team for quite a while, and we need to sort of revisit that. So I'll be sort of getting in touch with the infrastructure team very soon. In terms of call for action, Andrea with us today in the call, she's stepping down from co-leading the localization working group. Thank you so much, Andrea, for all the hard work that you've done in that. So we are going to be opening a call to nominate individuals as co-lead for the localization. I think I have a lot of typos in this slide, but yeah, Andrea, do you want to say anything?
Thanks, Batul. Basically, thanks to everyone. So when I joined the community, it was early 2021, and it has been an absolute like honor meeting you all. And I'm stepping down of the lead, which was already like I was being a little bit of pride and denial, but it's time to stop and the denial part and understanding that I no longer have the time to give to the community. I would really like to keep as part of the community, as a friend forever, and like I will be there, but I shouldn't be the lead. I shouldn't be one of the leads, and we have like so many people that could definitely have that role, that we are going to find a little bit away so that we can do this transition. Thanks. Love you all.
Thank you, Andrea, for all your hard work. Hearts in reactions and chat, please, for all of the hard work that Andrea has done. And yeah, we need to rotate chairs sometimes. We need to balance the work indeed in our working groups. So thanks, Andrea, thanks, Batul, and thanks, Translation and Localization Working Group. We're moving on to the next working group, which is the Accessibility Working Group. Can I give Liz the floor?
No. It's been a couple of kind of quiet months over the holidays and getting started again in a new year, but for successes. We released the accessibility policy, or we merged it in December, and we are promoting and discussing it. We are also talking about accessibility within the change to an upgraded book format, making sure that all that is screen reader accessible and accessible in other ways, keyboard navigable and things like that. Challenges kind of ongoing. We have a bit of a challenge recruiting people to participate and lead this group. And we're trying to figure out how to represent ourselves on the steering committee. It's a big time commitment for a volunteer-led group. I find it's a challenge to be one of the leaders of the group and also to have a lot of book content in my head that I'd like to contribute. It's hard to do both things. So it would be great if we had some funding so that we could work more on this. And as a person in the US, I really appreciate people mentioning that things here are going to be very difficult about funding this kind of work, or even admitting that you're doing it. So thank you guys for being part of my resistance. The things that we are celebrating is the merging of the accessibility policy. We had 17 different people reviewing, and we had hundreds of reviews, and it took us about 2 years to do this. We won an award in the Hidden REF competition, which looks to recognize people whose work in open science isn't traditionally, recognized in the academic structure, or compensated. Our call to action is that we kind of always want to look at how we can improve accessibility throughout the community, and we always hope for feedback. Anybody can contact me anytime if you have any suggestions about accessibility. We would like to have a discussion with the community about having what we're going to do with our accessibility guide. There's been some questions about whether to make that part of the ethics guide or whether it should be a guide that stands on its own. We've had some talks about it in collaboration cafes and some other times. But as part of maybe the new governance structure that's being developed, we can figure out how we make decisions about new guides and new content and where new content goes. We also got some feedback from Patricia Lotto, who has been working with us in the accessibility working group. She brings a lot of knowledge and experience from Metadocencia and has contributed a lot to reviewing our policies. And she finds that it's a little bit difficult to find the accessibility policy. It's in the community handbook now, I think. And so there has been a little discussion about should that be at a higher level in the hierarchy of the book. And I think that's the update for accessibility.
And what a great and wonderful update it is. I think that's more than enough. Fantastic work in the past period. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Accessibility Working Group, for all of the work. We'll move on to the Infrastructure Working Group. Jim.
Yes, thanks. So the exciting news is that as of either yesterday or the day before yesterday, we're now building with Jupyter-Book 2. So that's really cool. It was quite a big effort Sarah and Danny on our side did most of that work, but we also had a huge amount of support from the Jupyter Book and Mist MD team, particularly Angus, who was really quite willing to get like very directly involved. And we had this really nice, we've had a really nice set of sort of sessions of working together. We find a bug, we help them identify whether it's an upstream bug. If it is, they fix it, and then we all sort of benefit. So a bug is fixed in the upstream project, and we get the book looking better. So that's been really nice, and I think from both sides we're really happy about that and hoping to continue that. So I think that's sort of the main thing I wanted to share. And there's a bit of a challenge there because there are quite a lot of differences. There are going to be lots of small things which might have broken. So we're going to have to spend some time fixing those things, getting things sort of up to shape and adding back in more warnings and things for code quality stuff. So if I think my ask is if anyone does find little bugs and things like references don't work or the style of things has changed and doesn't look nice anymore, then definitely report at open issues and tag the infrastructure team because that's what we're here to do. But we're excited about the future. Mist MD, I've made a few small contributions to it and it looks really nice. We should be able to add features quite easily. It looks really nice to work with. So there should be some exciting stuff we can do with that in the future.
Exciting, and congrats as well of doing migrations. I'm not super technical, but I think that's a big thing. Congrats, and thanks, Jim, for presenting, and thank you, Infrastructure Working Group. Then we have a slight chance of change of plans because our updates took a little bit longer because we were doing amazing work, and but it does mess up our agenda. So what I propose to do is to take 5-minute breaks now, and then after the break, Malvika will give us an update regarding governance, which I got corrected in the chat for is a very exciting topic. So please do take a break, 5 minutes, I think, and then come back to discuss this very exciting topic with us. But in the meantime, please do get up, stretch some legs, get something to drink, and then come back refreshed for governancing. See you in a bit. People are slowly trickling back in after our break. And after our dramatic return with the ticking off the timer. In the meantime, maybe Malvika, if you can already share your screen and that we can check that everything works. And I see more people coming back, so I think we're getting ready to move on to our super exciting topic of governance. I am so looking forward to learn more about what is going on from Malvika. So Malvika, please give us an update.
Thank you, Esther. I love how many times you've said this is super exciting, so I got to make it exciting. So we're following the structure of community level, maintenance level, and constitution level governance. I've tried to put some slides together and added lots of link to issues. Again, the slide links are shared in the Pad, and Lele would be putting that in the chat in a bit. Just to give a bit of background, in 23-24 with Kirsty and Ale, we worked on adopting 3 institution levels. Before that, we had worked a lot with the community, and subsequent years, we saw that community was taking ownership of a lot of work and ramping up the work. In 2021, 2023, Anne worked a lot with the working groups. And now we see the working groups are ramping up their work, and there are a lot of beautiful things that are coming out of that. And then in the last year, we have tried to formalize constitution level, and we are hoping same trend of work being ramped up this year and coming years. So what does the ramping of work for constitution level look like? So we will be formalizing steering committee this year. Now we have invited people who are chairs of working group, and you briefly heard from Liz. All the chairs have received an email from us. We will also be inviting leads of delivery group, and I'll tell you what delivery groups are. These chairs and delivery group leads may also identify a representative from their working group or teams, so they can have consistent representation in the steering committee. This is to, again, allude to what Liz was saying. A lot of you are volunteers and there are a lot of responsibility you take as chair. So it's completely possible for you to think about delegating this task of representation in the steering committee by one of the group members who can take on additional responsibility. What is delivery group? Over the past few years, we've had a lot of projects that have gone through the Turing Way as a project conducted within the Turing Way. So one example that is still being concluded, Emma and I received some funding to have skills policy discussions around diversifying roles. We conducted that as a Turing Way project, and we included those in the report of Turing Way. However, we didn't really have a lot of ways to communicate about that work in the community more consistently beyond the community forum, which we did last year. Similarly, we have other projects like Turing Way Practitioners Hub, which is running the second cohort that Ariel, Lele, and I are working on, which is funded by Bridge AI to work with small, medium enterprises in adopting best practices for data science and AI. We have this year, and also previously, Andrea was one of the fellows. This year, Esther and Ariel are fellows who are conducting their fellowship research around the Turing Way projects. We have another project called Jupyter Hub Turing Way project, which is a CCI-funded project in collaboration with organizational mycology to invigorate community practices within Jupyter Hub, and all the findings and practices could be shared with the Turing Way community that Ariel, Kirsty, and Beth from organizational mycology are involved in. And then finally, Data Science Without Borders, which is a Wellcome Trust-funded project where I am involved outside my role at the Turing Institute to represent best practices from the Turing Way and also contextualize those practices for African health research. All of these projects are very strongly tied with the Turing Way, and we want to make sure that we have some sort of accountability to our projects and community, and we can tell our community what this work is and how we can actually bring some support from these work to support Turing Way community. So we have created a proposal roadmap for steering committee for 2025, and I'm presenting you only for the first quarter. You can learn more about it in the issue 4014. So our goal with the steering committee is to build community accountability for the work conducted in and around the Turing Way. So some of those could look like establishing and communicating processes for different delivery groups and working groups, making decision-making processes explicit for the community so the community members can identify how certain decisions are being made, prioritizing project or community agenda and reviewing them regularly. So a lot of that has happened with the Turing Institute's team that includes currently myself, Ariel, Lele, and Anne, and previously Kirsty. And then also we want to make sure that all the resources that we have developed, they can be provided and continued on, and also defining roles for the groups, that is, the group itself, the steering committee group, and the processes. So we don't currently have standard processes defined for steering committee, which we want to develop with the committee members. So we want to now invite all the representation from working groups and delivery groups. So this is an invitation. If you think that you are one of the delivery groups but we haven't identified you, please reach out to us so we can discuss and ensure that you are represented. We have currently proposed 3 roles: secretariat role, which we are hoping to be provided by a project delivery team. Until we have funding from the Turing Institute, it would be Ariel and Lele and I. But we are hoping to identify external funding resources, and once that happens, this secretariat role can also be moved outside the Turing Institute. We want to elect a chair, and we would invite nomination once the steering committee members have been convened once, which we are hoping to have in March or April. And this is a very new role. We've never had a steering committee or a steering committee chair, so the cadence will be agreed with the steering committee itself. And then finally, we would have a treasurer. Currently, it's Lele, who's our research project manager. Again, if we have funding from outside, we would establish the future scope for this role with the steering committee. There are many decisions can be made at the constitution level. Here are some examples in terms of advising on and ensuring accountability. So for example, we do have working group, and there are a lot of processes that you heard they have in place. Those documentation draft have been developed by Anne and reviewed by me and Kirsty, but we would like the steering committee to be able to approve them and operationalize them. And also providing leadership and strategic directions. This is our effort to move out these kind of roles outside the Turing Institute to the community. And one of our focus in the coming months would be to identify external partners, multiple partners. So we can have Turing Way supported not just by one institution, but multiple institutions. So there's more resilience and support for the project sustainability. We want to also apply for core funding. And hopefully, if we get funding externally, we might want to recruit staff from the community, allocate budget to different initiatives. We've heard that there are a lot of work that can be done in the infrastructure working group. We have funding associated with Book Dash. We have a lot of work that can be done in accessibility. And we heard from Liz that those kind of work will become very difficult to fund from the US funding location. So there are many things we can do if we have more flexible budget, which we don't currently. Building clarity around resources that are available for maintainers and community members. So of course, we do have community handbook forward and afterward in the book, but a lot of them may not be up to date. So this would be a place for steering committee to identify where we are not being transparent and where we can improve that. So there are many. I invite you to please look at this roadmap, and I've seen a few comments. You can leave comments in there that will allow us to bring those kind of conversations to the steering committee. Right. So I'm going to stop there and open the room for discussions around what are you thinking about it? What is your reaction to this? And if there is any advice or resources you would like to share as we start our formalization.
Yeah, we already had loads of questions in the chat. And I'm probably going to mispronounce your name again, sorry. But Katie, do you want to raise your questions via voice?
Sure. So I'm asking a lot of questions coming from the perspective of sociocracy and sort of consent-based model training. So one of the things that comes to mind here are membership, and I saw someone else sort of raise that question on how new working groups are stood up, how the membership for those working groups are defined, and then how sort of how that leadership is selected and sent on to the steering committee. Relatedly, how is the steering committee membership defined if it's sort of responsive to the working groups? And then how are decisions on that steering committee made? Is it a consent model? How's conflict dealt with? Is it a modified consensus? So yeah, so I guess those are some of the initial questions, which might be answered by the steering committee as you're standing up your governance model.
Well, thank you for those fantastic questions. And I think, yes, the model of decision making will be defined with steering committee, but just to go to the membership, currently we're inviting membership from the working group that are operational already, which are these 4 working group that we have heard from. And one of the things that I would meant to announce afterwards is that currently our community management is centrally managed by the team that we are in the Turing Institute, and we are in the next months trying to move that kind of closed work to the community, meaning we're inviting community volunteers to join that working group. So we will be moving that from let's say community management delivery to working group. So these terminology, we'll get used to it in the next few months. So that would become a working group, and that's currently what is hosting and organizing and providing secretariat support to the steering committee. So 4 working group representation in there. And the process for how working group is formed, we actually do have a documentation in 1 or 2 pull requests. And one of them is that you need to have at least 3 members to propose a working group. And you need to have some months of work to show that this working group is actually working. And the roles in there are definitely one chair, one secretariat, and secretariat, again, anyone who's able to take a bit more project management responsibility for that working group, and a few members. Some of the models that we have defined have come from translation localization working group, which has a lot more developed governance because they have worked with a lot of different languages. So they have to think about, working group within the working group. And then we also have seen infrastructure working group and book dash working group to see how they rotate chair models. So we are kind of going from the community, learning from them and bringing that similar model at the steering committee. So a lot of those will be defined with steering committee, but we do need to get this first group in place in order to make sure that these processes that are in pull request right now can be approved for remaining community. And just to say, all of those ideas of consensus-based approval or discussion-based approval, I think we will be inviting those ideas back from the community who are not already in steering committee. And one thing that we have definitely planned in the process is that any discussion that happens in the steering committee before approval, it has to go back to the community for request of comment. So maybe, after a decision is proposed by the steering committee, goes in the public for 4 to 6 weeks or something like that before it is approved. So we would try to build some of those in collaboration with the community and steering committee. So I think we would have a lot of trial and error in the next 6 months and see what works, what doesn't work. We are looking for those kind of objections for like, this is not the right way, or this is the right way.
I would think very carefully about how you were dealing with objections or concerns raised by that community commenting period. So do you just have to be responsive to the comments from the community, or does that constitute a block to the decision moving forward?
That's such a good point. We definitely have seen. So we've done some sort of issue-based invitation of voting, lazy consensus model. And sometimes we get blocked, and the block is very unnecessary blocking because, if someone could say, well, that is not what we think as a collective group. So we're hoping that some of the things that have previously blocked us, like even just the example that Liz gave, how does accessibility related resources sit into a guide versus an existing guide, And we've had conversation in collaboration cafes like, yeah, that it's not true that too many people come up with proposal to write a new guide. If we have heard this one request for consistently 1 year, it's kind of obvious that we do need a guide, but who makes a decision? So we kind of get blocked on those kind of decisions. It would be really helpful to have representation from community who would say, yeah, here is the decision we make. This is what it means for the future decision that we would be making. So kind of taking some of the initial decision to inform future decision making as well. So yeah, all of these, I think Ariel and I will be providing documentation. Kirsty and I also have a lot of let's say collective institutional knowledge of what has happened in the past, but not just us, Patricia and people who've been involved from very, very beginning. So it's not going to be just a couple of us. So having, and I guess another part is just want to mention, sometimes these people from the community who engage with these kind of discussions are the same people. So they're not 100% community. They're probably 10 people, 15 people. But we do hope that transparency is sufficient for rest of the community member who are not engaging or choosing not to engage. But at least they're reading the process and they can raise any concern that they may have.
So what's being mentioned in the chat here is that I'm on the organizing circle for a Mastodon instance called social.coop. We've got about 500 active users, about 100 or so actively engaged on our Lumio forum that we use for decision making. And we've definitely had a lot of tension in the group on sort of, when do you bring a proposal to the forum for a collective decision versus what is in sort of our working group model? So that sort of talks to your level of decision making there that you've identified. But what we've seen are people blocking decisions either because they have an incomplete understanding of the issue, or they have it's very low stakes for them because they can go in, throw a block, and then walk away. And those of us who are trying to like move something forward get really frustrated with that because like, no, you just stopped a process and then you left. So what is your responsibility to see that through?
Yeah, that is, I mean, I'm sure this is not controversial to say. I met folks from open source initiative who have worked on open source AI definitions. They had so much backlash last year that they got really, really blocked in even progressing. So there are people who would object when they hate something. People don't object when they love something. And that's the problem when, most people agree with, if they don't have strong opinion, if they kind of in agreement, they would not raise concern. So I feel like we do need to have some process for it. One thing that I just want to mention, I think Collaboration Cafe is a good place to have conversation about those open issues, right? Like, let's say these steering committee members proposed a solution to the community, goes on an issue, people are engaging. We can bring that in the collaboration cafes, which are more open forum outside the steering committee meeting, where we can kind of decide that by 6 weeks we have to make a decision. If we don't make a decision, there needs to be a good reason for why we're not making a decision. I feel like we've struggled to do that in the past because often it comes from, two people who are in the project management meeting where we're like, oh, we're blocked, we don't know what to do, but we can't take decision because we're not representing community's voice. But having this community group would allow us to get over those hurdle. But yeah, I've seen your comment as well, and I really appreciate that you're engaging with this very exciting topic. And we would be inviting some of these models that steering committee would be exploring and adopting, and maybe trialing and testing. Probably the whole year would be a trial period for us to see which one really works.
I'll offer that I just got my certification for sociocracy training. So if steering committee wanted to explore sociocracy, I'd be happy to offer some sort of what does that look like and what are some trade-offs there, because there are trade-offs that we can talk more about.
You can't back off now. It's on a recording, and I'll blackmail you with this 5-second shorts. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think it's really amazing that people in here are interested in getting people unblocked of making decision and finding the right model that works for the community dynamic. So thank you so much. I've missed all the questions, Esther. I know you're keeping an eye on it.
I think you've mostly answered questions in the chat, but not the one from Liz about terms of service for the steering committee. Do you want to say more about that, Liz, or can we go directly to an answer? You're muted.
Go directly to an answer.
So I will give you anecdotal period, Liz. I think from my personal experience working on any other advisory group, it feels like 3 years feels like a time where you think you have learned things and contributed back. 1 year feels very short because 1 year, as I'm saying, like we're going to be experimental. It's going to be annoying, confusing, chaotic. And you don't want people to leave with that experience. You want them to feel like, okay, now we've adapted to a rhythm. Now we know how to contribute. So my proposal to the steering committee would be to consider 3 years. But of course, anybody can leave anytime, given people's situation change. So this is absolutely my opinion, and we will bring it to the steering committee when they define their own office term and cadence.
Sounds good.
Awesome. And then at the very beginning of your talk or update, we had a little bit of confusion about delivery groups, because I think that's quite a new term.
Yes.
What are the obligations of a delivery group to the Turing Way, especially as some of them, like the Software Sustainability Institute's fellows, are perhaps related to the Turing Way, but not necessarily maybe a group? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think I would, I don't want to put you on spot, Kirsty, but you have your hand up. So why don't you explain this what delivery group could be?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this. So the key difference between a delivery group and a working group is that a delivery group has external accountability outside of the Turing Way. So What that means is that they probably have some funding, and that could be in-kind funding. You know, someone has been given 1 day a week of their job that they're allowed to contribute to the Turing Way for a particular, you know, adding a chapter, adding a feature, running an event. And what we're really leaning into in the distinction between a working group and a delivery group is that some delivery groups will not be able to be fully transparent or fully inclusive, as in they can't have fully open doors for anyone to participate because of those external constraints. So I'll give you a really critical example is human resources kind of responsibilities around, for example, performance management. You don't performance manage members of a voluntary working group, right? If people don't show up, you sort of acknowledge that and you sort of say, okay, well, maybe we're going to downweight some of your responsibilities, going to reallocate them. But you still allow people to kind of come along and participate, and you don't sort of, there are no consequences to not doing the work. However, if someone is paid to do their job and then they are not doing their job, there are HR responsibilities, and those will vary across organization, they'll vary across countries, they'll be very, very difficult. And it's paramount that that's not done in the same way as you would do, for example, and yes, Kathy, you're right, like it's a different flavor of performance management inside of a voluntary organization versus having staffing responsibilities. So that's the key distinction between a delivery group and a working group. There are also another example that's maybe less sensitive is the responsibilities to the funder may include some confidential documentation. So we at the Turing Institute had quite a few examples where there were policies inside of the Turing or communications inside of the Turing that we weren't allowed to talk about publicly, but they related to Mrs. Mackenzie, who's helping me out with this. And so being able to kind of just sort of acknowledge where we are not able to be transparent about decisions and conversations is a key factor. So that's the difference between a delivery group and a working group. A working group is ideally much more permissive and in a sense more aligned to a kind of preferred way of making decisions, but the delivery group is sort of acknowledging that it is difficult under capitalism to be perfect in every way. I also wanted to just quickly address this. There was a question about how does a working group start or how does a delivery group start? And that I think there's circularity with these conversations. That needs to be defined by the steering committee. So we need a steering committee in order to be able to figure out like those decisions. But I can tell you that what happens now is that basically there is a central team at the Turing Institute. It used to be me and Malvika. Now it's just Malvika, Ariel and Lele, who make that decision. And at the moment, it is sort of done with, I think, good intentions, but it is not done in a sociocratic or in a sort of more transparent way. And so the goal is to move to making that decision in a more transparent way. The reason I'm answering that question now is because the decision making for creating a delivery group versus creating a working group will be different, because essentially a working group is quite low stakes. So worst case scenario, 3 or 4 people get together, they say we want to work on something. If it doesn't end up kind of getting a huge amount of momentum, or it's not something that can kind of persist, it folds, it goes down. The stakes of giving something a delivery group status is much higher because there is some accountability associated with it. And also there is an endorsement of the working group. So if someone wants to come along and say, hey, I want to kind of basically use the Turing Way's prestige, community, all of that platform, because I want to do my project, then part of the work is making sure that we are sharing our kind of kudos with the right people. And that is a decision that, to be very clear, that has been done internally in a non-transparent way. I personally don't think we've made any really terrible mistakes on that front, but the goal is to move that to a more formalized way. But there is no documentation on that yet. This is part of the generative transition to being able to aim for much more transparent and therefore more inclusive and more equitable opportunities. Because at the moment, the way that you do it is you kind of know to ask. And one of the visions is that you would have more examples of how that could come up as an idea rather than just through asking in a conversation.
Would just add to that in a concrete example, Data Science Without Border is funded for 3 years, and I think it would be finished by 2027. And therefore, let's say a delivery group that is associated with Data Science Without Border will also dissolve when the project ends. Another thing also to add that the Turing Way community and team can provide some support to those delivery groups, where delivery groups are responsible for delivering what they have said their funders. But one reason to bring them into steering committee is to ensure that what they do is not detrimental to the rest of the community and project, and in some ways actually supports the maintenance. So for example, we do have a community manager fully funded from Data Science Without Border who could provide support in the community. And she is actually engaged in some of the working groups, but we can leverage that in places, let's say we do run out of a full-time community manager's funding. And we do need to maintain some of these work. How do we distribute? Which is also going back to some of the points that Liz, Esther, and you were talking about, is funded versus non-funded. You can expect funded person to take on more responsibility because their role is funded to support the Turing Way in some ways, directly or indirectly. But as Kirsty said, the documentation, full-fledged documentation for that is not available. We have one pull request that's linked in the slide, where we have added kind of some explanation for what this delivery group is and how it's different from working group.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you for elaborating
Esther,
on that. But
back to
indeed,
you.
we are running out of time. So I love that we're ending up in a paid versus volunteer discussion. But if you want to continue that, Collaboration Cafe, 19th of March, please do join. But for now, we still have a couple of community announcements to close off the call. And I'm not sure if anyone was going to announce this about joining the community management working group. Do we have an announcer person, or should I?
Kind of did say that in the previous one. It's a pull request. Please read and share. We are asking you to respond to a few questions so it can help us understand who's the right fit for working group. So yeah, that's the issue 4033.
Malvika, can you just explain why this is a working group and not a delivery group?
It is currently, it's a delivery group. Let me go back. We have a project delivery team, which is Turing funded roles, which are supporting the Turing Way project management and community management. So we are separating the community management and trying to bring and onboard more members to support with community management. The reason for that, as we have indicated a few times, we might not have funding this year. We will be able to tell you for sure next month, because we will hear from our organization if we do have the permission. But we're preparing for a time where we might not have for a period community management funding. And that would mean that someone needs to do this community management things. We would be downsizing some of the extra work that we are doing, but ensure that the practical and the most important work continues to happen, and which is why we are moving it to working group to have more community members support us with that.
Thank you for still elaborating on that one. Ooh, did I go too far? Yes. Ideas for book dashes beyond May 2025. Ariel, did you want to highlight this or should I?
I can flag it. Yep. As we already mentioned, we're exploring alternative activities and ways of formatting the book dash. For a very long time, to give people context who are new, the book dash has run as a essentially since the pandemic, the book dash has run as a week-long hybrid event that has been able to offer significant activities like the Scriberia illustration and various different workshops, as well as accessibility and sustainability funding for people to join. This model is going to look different going forward, and we'd like to get community input on what other ideas people have for how we can do structured contributions that bring together the whole community in a fun way, and also support that as well. So this is alternative funding sources for activities and accessibility funds, as well as alternative formats as well. Perhaps you find the week-long contribution session a bit intense and can't make them all, and you want to suggest an alternative cadence for a special event that might be more accessible to you, or you want to suggest some alternative activities that we can also arrange to have as part of the book dash as well. We're looking for all different ideas. So if you have attended a book dash in the past at all, and you have views on how you would do things differently, if it was unconstrained by previous formats, then please do add your thoughts to the issue that Lele has helpfully linked. And yeah, as Liz says, especially low-cost ways of doing these things because of funding changes. But we're also really happy to look at funding sources as well. So if you have ideas for those, let us know. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you. And then there's another issue open on whether we want to endorse the Invest in Open Infrastructure statement as a community. I see that Ariel opened it. Do you want to also highlight this one?
Yeah, so please do share your thoughts on this. This is it's a statement that was put out a few weeks ago by Invest in Open around statement of support for a global research ecosystem. I would like to get some community feedback on this, and maybe what we can do is then kind of see what the feeling is. Everyone is able to sign as an individual as well, so it doesn't stop you signing as an individual. Please do go and sign it. I'm in favor of signing it, but I just thought, you know, we as a community get to decide these kinds of things. And in the absence of steering committee, this is probably a decision that once the steering committee has stood up, we can sort of take it to them and say, steering committee, we need a decision. But as that's still a little bit away, and it would be nice to do it sort of relatively close to the statement being issued, please do share it. Maybe we'll have a discussion on it at the next collaboration cafe and then make a call.
Fantastic. And I think you can also just put in an emoji in this issue. I think that's what I did. So you don't need to have a very elaborate opinion to contribute to this one. And then we're moving to this open Q&A for which we don't have time, and this AOB mystery, which I still don't know, which is actually the abbreviation of a union here. So join a union. This is the time to join unions. But we have unfortunately run out of time. So I think we may need to just close it off here and thank everyone. Any other business? Thank you for resolving my abbreviation issues, Richard. But for now, we're going to stop the recording, and if anyone has time to hang out, that can be done afterwards. But I would like to formally close off the call by thanking everyone for being here today. All of our working group chairs in particular who did an update. Malvika for giving us the excitement of the year about governance. Thank you so much for this very, very needed discussion, Malvika. And then I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of people. But thank you so much for providing such an inspiring start of the year, which is otherwise sometimes a little bit less inspiring. So thank you all and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Esther, for sharing this. It was fantastic to see you all.